back.
And we're back, guys. Welcome back to the Honest Pod.
Welcome back, everybody. We are excited that you're here, and it is so fun to be in week 3 with the amazing Shara, now Photius, with us, walking through the journey. It was so cool to actually get to hear a couple of weeks ago, to get to hear your journey and where you've been, and when I was thinking about it, I was like, honestly, it's only been a little over, it's been like a year and a half since you've been on, and so much life has happened.
You know what? I'm so sick of that. Every single year, it's that story for me. It's like, why does so much happen in like a year? It's like, slow it down. But I guess that's maybe the story of a 7, where it's just like,
and also your age. I mean, these are all maybe. Like, getting married, having babies, like friends that are having babies, family dynamic, like your parents are getting older. So it's like parents start having things go on. Like they're just, I feel like it's an age thing, because right now there's a lot happening, but I do feel like in the course of a year and a half, different than you, I have experienced a lot of things, but it's just been such an internal, like, I feel like things have been pretty steady. We've lived in the same place. Mario's business is good. The kids are slowly growing, but there's been a lot of like internal stuff that's happened with the business, but not like you've had massive life things in a year and a half. So it's so amazing to see you come back on and be like, well, this is what happened to me in a year and a half. And I'm still standing. Yeah. I'm barely still standing.
I'm on my knees, but I'm getting back up. It's a remix hitting iTunes near you, Spotify. It's going to be the new opener song.
It's been cool to see that. And then for us to be able to dive into the series that we're in right now, Engaging Trauma, like the steps to engaging trauma. There are steps to engaging trauma. And what I love that we're doing is we're actually working backwards. We're not starting at like, okay, this thing happened to me. Let's talk about it. We're more like, where am I today? And how can I work backwards into actually finding the roots of why I am the way I am, or why I'm feeling. And last week we talked about this contemptuous place, either contempt for self or contempt for others. And it was a fantastic conversation. And I'm excited about where we're going to go today. But before we get into that, I wanted to just, I just want to lighten the mood. And I want to know, I'm going to answer first, but you be thinking about it. If you can think of a time, I have so many, which is
shocking, because what she's about to lead into is like, what's something that's like really embarrassing that happened to you. With like personalities like Karrie's, I just don't feel like embarrassment is something that's like super on the scale. You know what I mean? Like it's just like who you are. It does take a lot.
It takes a lot. And this is a lot.
Okay.
And I have multiple stories of variations of this, which is probably some kind of weird assault from the enemy or something, but we'll not go there. Okay. So I was in 8th grade, and the youth group went to the beach for like a beach bonfire thing. And because I was in 8th grade, I wasn't like totally sold out like the other girls, like in the high school group, that were like, I'm not trying to get my hair wet. I'm just trying to be here and be cute. I was still in the phase of like, I'm trying to be that, but also I'm trying to like jump in the waves. I'm trying to like go and have fun and just be like, I'm out there like jumping with my friends, like stand firm on the word of the Lord, and then jump over the wave. I'm still that girl, So I am there, and I'm in a bikini because I don't know, I guess I went to a church that, didn't body shame at that point, but I went.
That is shocking, actually.
I know, up to that point.
Where's your extra large youth group t-shirt that you should have immediately been passed?
And honestly, per this story, would have been helpful.
Yeah.
But I go and I'm playing, and there is a particular guy that I, of course, like, and I think he's like a senior, or a sophomore or junior or something like that. And the youth group's not big. So it's not like we're at, it was Dad's church, and Dad's never like pastored a mega church. So it was like the youth group was a little smaller.
Yeah.
And so the group was small. And so I go out and I'm playing, like, you know, having a good time. And I'm with like another, you know, junior high girl, and all the other girls are like standing around the circle and like whatever about life. And just, oh my gosh, yeah, the humidity is making my hair so curly. And I'm out there like looking like a wet dog, like hair just like,
come out here.
I'm like, look, I can make my hair into Washington. Like, it looks like George Washington with the lip curl. I can
like,
show you.
hello, governor.
And so I come out and everyone is standing in a circle facing each other, just kind of like talking or whatever. And I'm standing there, you know, like kind of wet, but it's warm outside. So I don't have a towel, I'm just kind of like air drying. And everyone's talking and stuff, and everyone's kind of acting weird, but I'm just playing around like, hey guys, blah, 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 blah. And the guy standing next to me is the guy that I like, you know, he's the cute guy and whatever. This is just so tragic. And he looks over and he kind of whispers.
Tell me, I need to know.
He kind of whispers. He's like, hey, your right boob's out.
I'm surprised he let you know, honestly. What a godly man. I feel like most boys would have been like, hey, wait a minute. Let's ride this one out.
Like, he didn't even just say, hey, like, fix your top. Like, he was very specific so that I didn't get it wrong. Your right boob is out. Like, in the middle of me just talking. I'm talking, and I'm like, he's like, hey, take a look. And I look down, I'm like, I like literally freaked out, pulled up my top, and I ran back into the like, I was like, I'm gonna go drown myself.
You're like, let's redo this, actually.
I am.
This Baywatch moment was supposed to look different.
It was like supposed to come out, you know, looking like Bo Derek coming out of the water, which that reference,
I have no clue who that is.
But like a 70-year-old. But yeah, coming out of the water with, you know, my hair looking out like I'm glistening from the sun. Instead, I look like, you know, Gus coming out with my bathing suit on and my hair looking.
First of all, you don't even need to make the Gus reference, because you just referenced your teenage body as a 70-year-old man. And so, like,
no, I'm saying the only people that will understand that reference is a 70-year-old man. I did not look like a 70-year-old. I was like SpongeBob SquarePants in a bikini trying to do the most out there, and then oops, my top falls open.
Isn't it so funny how, like,
when my little grapes,
your little grapes, your dime size. It's so crazy, like, how when you're younger, that is like, I remember as a kid, like, that is the worst case scenario. Like, going in the pool at camp
today, Shara.
No, if that happened to me at the beach, I've been like, well, whoops, like, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean?
Like, well, I guess my son wants to nurse, so
yeah, like, this is not fun for anybody at this point. Nobody's getting anything out of this. So let me just
it's causing nobody to stumble at this point.
I'm like, no matter what slips out, like, I haven't shaved, like, things are sagging, like, it's a whole show. I don't know if anyone else can relate.
Where you just put the top up. At this point, you're just kind of shoving things back into place.
I actually rely on other people, because I'm like, I don't feel much on those surfaces anymore. So any wind hitting it, I'm unaware. Like, someone please let me know. If you see something, say something. So
okay, I actually agree. You're right. I mean, junior high, oops, your top falls down, to 49-year-old Karrie, oops, your top falls down. It does hit different. You're right.
Yeah, it really does
hit different. It hits different for everybody involved.
Yeah. Everybody's reacting differently these days.
Yeah, it is definitely. Even Mario would probably be across the circle, like, hey, your boob's out. Like, and I'd be like, oh,
he's like, she's too far away. She'll figure it out. Just let it be. Someone will let her know who's closer. Could you imagine Mario down the beach being like, Karrie, your nipples out? Just echoing down the beach.
No, and not because he wanted to save face, just because he's like, it's too much energy.
He's like so upset he's got to put his socks back on with his tennis shoes on the beach. Sorry, that's an inside joke.
For all of you guys listening, my husband hates the sand. And so he has on multiple occasions showed up to the beach, bathing suit on, tank top, socks, and tennis shoes.
He's like, babe, I'm coming. He's like, let me just put on my Nike socks. my slides.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
So that is my embarrassing moment.
Yeah.
It was tragic and horrible. Do you have anything?
I do.
Maybe you
Oh,
don't. Maybe you don't.
okay.
Oh,
So
maybe you do.
similar to you, I don't have like a ton, like when, it's one of those things that, because this is like a question that comes up with like in new groups of people or whatever, I try to remember like what's something embarrassing, because like I don't get embarrassed easily. I get
Right.
like the like regret, like twinge quite a bit, where you're like, oh, why did I say that or whatever? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Like this podcast so far.
Like this podcast. Poor Mario. He's gonna be like, hey guys, what the heck, man? Leave me
Also,
out of it.
for sure, we didn't just drop boo, but we dropped another word too, and it's fine.
Enjoy. This is an 18
We're
and up
honest.
episode. Please check your children into childcare. But there is something that happened. Okay, for those who don't know, my husband Devin and I, our marriage moved really quick. Like we literally got engaged after 9 months of dating, and then we're like married at a year, like 3 months after our 9-month engagement. So like literally at a year.
You know.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to like remember in your relationships, like things that you did and didn't do like early on. Like we were married and still figuring some of that stuff out, right?
Right.
So, we're really just getting into it this episode, like with like the boobs and the gas and all of this kind of stuff. So I refused to like go to the bathroom in front of my husband. Like I was just like, I'm not doing that. Like I'm not going to pass gas. Like I'm just, I'm so dainty. I'm such a lady. I don't even do it. Like those things don't come out of me, period.
That's so crazy.
That's all he needs to know. I know, but I was like a year in. I'm like, I barely ate around him. I was still nervous. Just kidding. That's not true. But so one night, this was like a month or so after we got married, I woke up and I had like passed gas and it smelled so bad and I freaked out. This was like my worst case scenario coming true. Like this was going to wake him up and he was going to leave me. He was going to pack his things. He was going to run out the door and he's going to be like, she tried to kill me. And
sending
it
divorce
smelled so
papers
bad.
immediately.
Yeah, literally had them waiting. Like I just know it, like for this moment specifically. And so I'm freaking out and I'm half asleep still, but I mean, it woke me up. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, it's just a matter of time.
It hit you like a wall, like a right hook.
I pride myself on being quick on my, quick on my feet. And so like, I was like, what we need to do right now is we need to kiss him. He's dead asleep. But we'll fix all of it because he'd be breathing me in and not the air. So maybe that will mask it. But guys, when I tell you the amount of embarrassment that went through my body, it's like, it seems like such a weird thing, but it's one of my like biggest fears is like, you're going to smell me stinky. Like, you know what I mean?
So are you still like that now?
Yeah, kind of.
Wow.
I know. I just like whatever I have to, no, it's just too much information. You guys just don't need to know all that. But like, yeah, I'm just weird about it. Yeah. I don't know.
And you started making out and did he smell you?
He didn't know. He didn't smell it. So it works. So if anyone's new in their marriage and you wake up and there's an accident, a gas accident, immediately lean over, make out with your husband, and he'll be so consumed by the love that he won't smell the atrocious particles in the air. Pro tip. You're welcome.
Hashtag pro tip. Aren't you glad
People
you guys are
totally tuned out of this episode? They're like, what is this?
I thought we were talking about trauma.
Yeah, trauma. You're like, that was traumatic for me.
Honestly, same.
Yes,
it was traumatic for me. And you guys are now traumatized by listening to it.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the things you have to look on life because you're looking back and going, there is a strong difference between things that are embarrassing, things that are horrifying, and then things that are shameful. And I think a lot of times, this is why I asked you, one, because I just needed a good laugh on a Tuesday. But
classic.
I asked because I needed a laugh. And secondly, I ask because I do think that many of us think of shame as places where we're like embarrassed or like we did something stupid or we're stinky or whatever. And we don't understand, well, one, the rootedness of shame, what shame really is, and really where it is on the kind of scale of healing. And so I wanted to tell you first and foremost, like shame it can be linked to embarrassment, but it's embarrassment that hasn't been cared for, talked about, or dealt with. And it's moved then into it being an external thing that happened, into it being an internal thing about you. So I'm at junior high. This thing happens to me. Obviously, it was a traumatic event, but I was able to work through it. I told my parent, I was like telling my mom, and my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing." And she brought some comfort and care there. And I actually remember being with one of my friends, and my friends like talked it out with her. And so it wasn't this like stuck embedded moment,
Yeah.
it actually was being able to work through. And now it's funny. And now I can look back, clearly the gas thing, like you're looking at that going, it was not a traumatic event. It was embarrassing, but it wasn't a traumatic event. I didn't feel powerless necessarily in that moment. I felt like, well, let's avoid that and move to something else. And so I say all of this because embarrassing moments are not equal to shame. However, embarrassing moments, humiliating moments that aren't tended to could actually move to shame. They could move to shame. So what I want to talk about today is I want us to work backwards. I know last week, for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, which you should, because, we really show up for
it's
this
a lot
thing.
better when it's visual.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
for sure. And I always want, when I'm listening, I'm like, what do these people look like?
I know.
And
It's
you're
like,
not
I
on
wish I could
social
see
media.
you back.
Right.
I think I'm going to get back on, but that's a whole different podcast we have to work through.
For a different day.
Yeah.
No problem. But anyway, if you were watching last week on YouTube, Shara actually showed a chart from my book, Free and Fully Alive. And this chart shows the process of what happens when trauma has not been tended to. And so what we've decided to do is walk you guys through, like go backwards through to get to a trauma moment. So I really wanted to start with like, what is shame and what isn't it? Last week we talked about this contempt of others, this contempt of self. Like that's the full outcome of untended to trauma. And we talked a lot about that. If you haven't listened,
which I just have to say was an incredible conversation as someone who received a lot from that conversation. It, for the past week or a week and a half or whatever, has been in the back of my brain. And I've had such great conversations with people around that subject. So if you haven't listened to it, I really encourage you to go listen to it because I received so much from that.
Yeah, I did too. And it made me think about a lot of places in my life where I have contempt for other people and wondering like, why is that there? And how can I take a look at that? So if we move backwards, if we're really going back up to where our goal ultimately is to actually heal the root of why we have contempt towards ourselves or contempt towards it for others. That's our goal. We don't want to just name that we're okay. I have this contemptuous heart. I have this hatred, this disgust. I have all this towards myself or towards others. That's where we have to start in honesty. Where am I really? And then when we're moving backwards is when we bump up against shame. Shame is really the driving force of the next step of this contemptuous. So if we're working backwards per the chart, we look at contempt towards self or others. And then right next to that, we hit shame. And shame is really this place where whatever has happened to us, we have internalized it and it has become us. So we have believed, in essence, we are bad, that something is flawed about us. And because of that flawedness, that shame, we hate ourselves or we hate others. We want to keep other, it's all their fault.
Is that shame because we believed a lie, or is it a truth that because it was undealt with, it became like, is it rooted in truth or a lie? The shame.
Shame is always rooted in lies.
Okay.
And shame is always, it's never from God. Shame is never from God. Shame is manifested because we haven't gotten to we actually the root of what has caused the story, which we'll get into next week, has been untended to and cared for, and therefore it has produced shame. So again, we'll talk about more the trauma next week and how that kind of falls in line. But what I want to talk about is understanding where shame lives on our healing journey. Once we acknowledge and are honest about these, like where I'm really at. Yeah, I am really pissed at, like we talked about, like, the church, my parents. I have disgust towards myself. I need to get honest about that. And then I need to be able to tend to and name the shame. I feel disgusting. I feel like a fraud. I feel like I need to protect myself from the world because they're going to hurt me, and I'm weak, and so they'll take control of me. This place of shame is often where the church spends most of their time. They spend a lot of their time talking about shame, and the problem is they don't go beyond that.
Yeah,
And we just go
that's
with shame.
true.
But shame is really in the middle. It's in the middle of our healing journey. We name our pain, or we name where we really are, or we, with honesty, and then we engage our shame. What is the shame saying? What
I
is
think
the
that's such a
shame
good point,
rooted in?
actually. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
feels like shame is something that, in your reference in the church, it's something that we all can so easily relate to. It's such an emotional pull where it's like, hey, if you are feeling this way, we're here for you, you know. And it's a very engaging, I don't know if it's an emotion or whatever it is, like it's just a lot of us, if not everybody, feels that. But once we've realized what our shame is, where do we go from here? Like, okay.
Yes. And that is what we are going to, it's kind of, hard because obviously we're doing this in three portions, but really shame is the result of something else.
Yeah.
And you can be, and shame on its own is traumatic, but you can be shamed, but shame is the outcome
Mm.
of, of a place that you have been wounded that has not been tended to. So when we look at the healing chart, we're looking at shame. And if we stop at shame, like just like I hear lots of messages, you just need to heal your shame. You're a child of God. You are his workmanship. You don't need to feel shame. You are an overcomer. And we're going, okay, I'm a child of God. I believe this. And yet we're confronted all the time with the places where we are like, I hear that. I don't believe it. I don't believe it in my heart. I'm not living it. That's for sure. So let me give you an example, and then I'm going to ask you a question about this. So if you look at, I've offered this story many, many times. I mean, there's the woman at the well. There is Peter when he's denied Jesus. Both of those stories, we see this pattern to come. Jesus engages them and makes them, per his presence and his questions, get honest about where they really are. So you look at Peter, he is very shameful. He's like, I'm just the worst. I denied Jesus, and he actually goes back to his old name. He goes back to his old way of doing things, fishing. He is just like, I'm disregarded. What's the word? Disqualified. And so he's out there, right? And same with the woman at the well. She comes to the well and she's like, wanting there by herself. She's not with her group of people, the group of women, because clearly she's, really had a rough go in the village and is pretty much like the town kind of whore, and Jesus engages her. In both of those scenarios, he gets them to get honest where they are. And, because he's like, hey, go get your husband and I'm going to tell him exactly where I'm going to tell the two of you where this water is. Hey, Peter, come and have dinner, like come and eat with me. And do you love me? Feed my sheep. He begins to engage and like, yes, Lord, but it says he's grieved. This woman is like, now I'm embarrassed because I don't have a husband. So she half lied, right? And he goes, well, you don't just have a husband. You've had 6 husbands. And the one that you're with now, you're not even married to. Well, that's a very shaming, right? Like it feels very shaming. Like, why would you bring this stuff up? And here's my point in saying all of this is that Jesus had a greater goal in mind for both Peter and for this woman, this Samaritan woman at the well. His greater goal was not just to go, hey, I love you. You're my child. I've died for you. Hey, Peter, I rose again. Don't even worry about what you did. He actually wants to uproot a narrative that that they have begun to believe. Peter's disqualified. She is unlovable. right? Like all these men have taken advantage of her. The only way to do that is to actually name and engage the places of shame that they have believed I am ultimately a fraud, disqualified, not good enough. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Totally. I'm trying to apply it into, I think it's so important to name the shame. I think I'm going in my mind, how does shame, like, where does shame come out in our lives? Like, how is it with numbing? Is it with, you know what I mean? Like, how can we follow the trail to find the shame if that doesn't feel super, if it doesn't feel easy to some people to be like, okay, well, yeah, I'm embarrassed of that, but what is like shame? How do I follow some of those? I don't know. Like, how do I identify where I'm super shameful?
Right. And that's where it goes back to last week's. That's a great question. And that's how it goes back to last week's conversation. When we actually identify contempt, that place of like, I'm disgusting or I have hatred towards others, it will automatically leave us to what we believe about ourselves. So what we talked about last week is the outcome. These are what we do externally. We isolate from people. We don't go to church. We are gossips. We are, have self-righteousness. And so these are the outcome, but they're motivated by shame. And the shame says internally, I am intrinsically flawed. I am bad. I am. So what my question would be, what are the narratives that you carry that drive you to want to stay away from people, that make you want to not care for yourself? What are those narratives and what do you believe about yourself?
Yeah.
So I'll give you a for instance for me, and then maybe you could give a for instance for
Totally.
you. So for me, my outcome is not, I don't have a lot of contempt for other people. Yeah, I do somewhat. But more of it is internal. And the way that shows up internally for not caring for myself is overproducing, not taking care of my body, not taking care of my mental health, having to be the rescuer for everybody. That's kind of how I show up, which does not show care and love for me. Actually shows that I don't actually care about me. And the narrative, the shame narrative for me is no matter what I do, I will never measure up. I will truly never be good enough to measure up to what will allow me to be seen as worthy. Another shame narrative for me is that if people get too close to me, they will not want to be around me. They will leave me. I am too much for people. That's my shame narrative. And because of that, it drives these places of contempt for myself. And I do things that actually dishonor me in ways that actually hurt me. Like I overwork and I have to overprove myself or I isolate and I'm like, okay, I don't want anybody to be around me because I'm just I'm not, they're going to find out who I really am and they're not going to be my friends. So it leaves me very isolated, very alone, and very much in this cycle of trying to prove myself, even though the shame narrative is I never will. I never will. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think that for me, when it comes to my shame narrative, I really do feel like if I can visually, it feels like it's in so many different facets of my life. It's not just one. I have so many that I feel like it almost feels like you're in a padded room where you're like, oh, get some momentum and I want to go do this, or I want to be this, or I want to experience this. But the shame, you like run right into this padded wall, and the shame is just like, nope, you can't, because that narrative will not let you move forward in your life in these certain areas, is kind of how shame is for me. And so, I mean, we've talked about this before, but definitely I am like just the most hardcore isolator in the entire world. I don't think people are safe. Like I don't think the world's safe. I don't think people are safe. And I isolate. And because of that, like you're saying with your body, like I deprive myself of connection. I deprive myself of activities. I deprive myself of like joy because I will get stuck in just, this is safe. This is home. This is me. I don't want to engage anybody else. And the reality of that, my shame narrative, is if I engage with other people, they'll expect something and I'll disappoint them, or I won't be enough. And so why put myself in the situation where I'm going to get them to like me and then I can't produce what they need me to be for them, because of my capacity, which is like, I'm just not enough. Like, I'm not good. I'm not enough. And when it comes to like career stuff, I've always wanted to pursue these amazing things, but I like won't let myself pursue them because I'm like, you can't do that. You're not capable of that. Like, and that goes back to like, I was told that I can never do anything but be a wife. And so why would I believe any different when that was something that was taught to me at a really young age? So it just feels like there's a lot of shame blocks that I constantly am coming up against.
It's huge to be able to hear you say, because, obviously you're my sister, so I know your story. And I think this is where people can get like, we get very formulaic and we're like, okay, it's step 1, step 2, but shame and contempt, they're like intermixed, right? Like, it's not just like I have shame and then shame is boom, now I have contempt for either myself or for others. They work intermixed together. And shame drives our activity or lack of activity. It drives that. And so that driving is what we talked about last week, the outcome. Okay, I'm going to hate the church. I'm going to not, I'm not going to be connected to other people. They're dangerous or whatever. And it comes from a shame narrative that says, like you said, people aren't safe. I think a huge one of what you just named is, I want to do all these things, but I'm not smart enough. I'm not accomplished enough. Like, I won't be able to do it, because over and over again, and this again, what we'll talk about next week, is that's a rooted story for you of what you've been told, that instead of your little brain going, I'm 7 years old, and what you're saying, hey, you're being a jerk and that's super rude. That's not who I am. I'm a child of God and I'm amazing. We believe what we've experienced or what we've been told. And what I would say is, we turn on ourselves.
Yeah.
So what has happened to us, what has been told to us, we turn on ourselves. And I see this all the time when I work with people who have, if we really get there, who have been sexually assaulted as little kids. And inevitably, if they have not worked through their trauma and they come to me, I can guarantee you, somehow the enemy and their sweet little brains have made it their fault. Without fail.
Yeah.
And they're 5. How can that be they're 5? Abuse. Oh, well, he wasn't that bad. I mean, he was really good. And, he was having a hard day. And so that's why he slapped me. It's like, but I shouldn't have been so mouthy.
Yep.
I should have been quieter. I should have studied more. I knew he was upset. I should have gone to my room. It becomes this place where what has happened to you, which is essentially the traumatic event that has happened to you, the enemy swoops in and exploits and takes advantage and begins to whisper, if you were just smarter, that wouldn't have happened. If you would have said something to somebody, he would have never have done that. If you would have just fought back, that wouldn't have happened. In this it's insidious.
Yeah, it's like what happens to you. What happens to you? The narrative switches to, this happened because of you.
Ooh, yes, that's it.
Yeah.
This happened because of you. What happened to you? That's so good. Shame is, this is what happened to you, and what the trauma is, this is what happened to you. What the enemy does when trauma's not been cared for in a proper way, it's now, what did you say?
Because of you. This happened because of you.
Oh, that's so good, Shara. And I think that, and then because you did this and you don't want to feel that kind of pain anymore, you act out in contemptuous ways. I hate everybody. I'm going to burn the place down. Or I am a loser. I'm never going to amount to anything, or people are dangerous across the board. There is no one safe. So I'll stay isolated, which the enemy loves because he can tell you anything he wants then. No one's there to defend you. And this is what shame does. And it is evil.
It feels like it is so evil. And because of that, from my personal experience, I feel like it's so hard to engage, because I feel like if anything, we try to avoid our shame, whether that be through busyness, numbing, whatever, because it's such an overwhelming, it's like a desperate feeling. So how do we flip the narrative to where we don't see it? Because really what it is it's another sign along the way saying you're going the right direction. It's actually not a negative thing. It is, but it's leading you towards the bigger picture. So how do we turn towards it in love? Because I just want to avoid it personally, which is not good.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, what we're inviting people into is really beginning. What you're doing right now is naming it. And you're going, this is what I think about myself. So I'm no longer just living out these patterns that I'm like, I don't know why I do what I do. I just don't ever want to engage with people. Like, I don't know. So I'm just going to stay not engaging in people. But what you're actually doing right now, even on this podcast, and what you've been doing, you know, and what I've been doing for years, is we start to look at our patterns that are no longer serving us. They're no longer serving us anymore. Now, I would say some of your patterns when you were younger, mine as well, some of those adaptive behaviors that we did, like, hey, no one's safe, so really go inward, kept you protected from some really dangerous people. But as you get older, those adaptive behaviors become maladaptive. They're no longer serving you well. You're still in that mode of, I'm in an abusive home, or I don't want to get hit, or I don't want to get yelled at, or whatever. But the problem is you're an adult now, and you're taking those adaptive behaviors into your current life, and it's creating patterns that are keeping you in contemptuous activity towards yourself or towards others. So what we do is we go, okay, what are the patterns that are happening that are not serving me anymore? It served me back in the day, but they are not serving me anymore. So we'll take the one that you brought up, isolation. Like, there was a lot that needed to happen where you had to turn inward because your home was emotionally volatile. And so it was easier for you to go, I'm all I got. Like, I got to turn inward, and I'm not going to trust anyone. Even if there are trustworthy people, the ones that I'm seeing are not, and I don't want to go there. But what we're doing now is we're going, tell me what you then believe about yourself. Tell me what you believe about yourself. Yes, I see you're isolating. Tell me why.
Yeah.
What do you believe about yourself? What is the narrative that's driving that behavior? Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
So then we begin to name that.
Yeah. Okay. That's super helpful for my own process and understanding. Okay, what do we believe, and where can we like almost sync up the habits that are happening here to childhood, and where can we say, this is not what's happening, but I'm acting as if I am 7 right now because this is what I knew. Okay. Gotcha.
Right. So here's the problem. Is
another
that
problem?
Shame. Yeah, it's another problem. Well, this is a problem, but with a really great solution. Is that oftentimes in church settings or youth group settings, or, even in home life, you will scratch the surface. Someone will begin to share, and they will share something that feels shameful, a story that feels shameful, or, something like from their past or whatever. And we begin to override it or bypass it with things like, that wasn't your fault. You're a child of God. You don't need to think that way. I'm a safe person for you. You should want to connect. I want to connect with me. You should want to connect. I want to connect with you. You should want to connect with me. And we do this to ourselves too, which actually produces more shame. Because we go, oh yeah, I'm supposed to, oh shoot, I'm a child of God. Okay, yeah, I need to remember that. I'm not a disgusting little girl. I'm not, I am safe. I am safe. Okay, I need to feel more safe. Okay. Well, what's wrong with me? Because I don't. and we keep overriding and overriding. And the church creates a ton of programs and we preach a bunch around shame, which I think that's great that we discuss shame, but we're not understanding where it lives on the healing path. It is not the end. It's the middle. We identify where we are and the behaviors that we're doing that we don't like, that are maladaptive.
I think that's so important, actually, because it's interesting when shame is brought up, it's identified how we can put ourselves in a position because we're not dealing with the heart of the issue. We're setting ourselves up for more quote unquote failure by trying to force ourselves, okay, I've identified it. So now you're good. Now go be this person that you're not yet. And you're finding yourself in the same habitual like routines, which is making you more filled with shame. I think that's an incredible and insightful thought. I've never thought of that before.
I mean, think about how freeing it would be if we really understood where shame lived on our healing journey. If you look at it like this, let's say there's a weed in your garden. I'm trying to give like a good example. I wish there was more like a little bit clearer, but you'll get it. The top of the weed we see, right? It's like, oh my gosh, there's a weed in my garden. And we just like take scissors and we just cut the top of it off. And it's like, inevitably, it's like literally back the next day. Like it grows so fast.
Yeah.
And let's say that we go, oh man, we really, it's a big weed and we really pull and we get a chunk of it out. And we're getting, I mean, it was under the surface. We got the top and we got like under the surface portion of it, but we never got the actual root. It might take a little while for us to see things manifest again, or like the top of that weed to come out of the ground again. But inevitably, without getting to the root, we really did not solve the problem. We might have put it at bay for a while. We might have gone like, okay, I can choose some better behaviors, you know, okay, yeah, I'm a child of God. I'm going to believe that. Okay. Yes, I'm going to try to engage in more. So I'm going to, you know, here's my list. I'm going to meet with 3 people this week and I'm going to engage with conversation with them. And that's all fine and good. The greater question, and this is what, you know, can kind of end our conversation here. I'll give you a couple steps of things and some thoughts that you might have, Shara, but the greater issue is if we understand where shame lives on our healing journey, we can understand that naming our shame and understanding what we think truly about ourselves, whether right or wrong, if shame, it's wrong, that's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah.
We have to get to the root. Why do I feel this way? What was the story that drove this? Where did it come from? And what does it need to actually be uprooted out of my life? If we stop at shame, we may pull a big chunk of the weed out, but if we don't get to the root, it will eventually come back.
Yeah. Wow, guys. I feel like because we've had so many conversations around this, but I feel like the last few episodes, I'm with the listeners, I'm in this with you. Like I am in self-discovery mode alongside you, all of you. And I feel like today was so good. And I feel like I knew a lot about shame, just I feel like in therapy, like you said, and in church, it's covered a lot. I don't think I realized how much I was stopping at shame or awareness, I guess. Like I'm aware of the shame. I'm aware of it's probably from this trauma, but the awareness of the shame or the trauma, it doesn't mean you've healed from it.
Right. Right.
Anyways.
I'm going to end with this example because I think it's important. So you have Adam and Eve in the garden. They're all perfect. Everything is great. All of a sudden they eat the apple. We know the story or whatever, fig or whatever it was. And then they hide themselves behind fig leaves and they hide from God. God, Jesus is walking in the garden. He's calling for them. Adam, Eve, where are you? He obviously knows where they are. But he does this as invitational. And then he begins, and it says, and they hid where they had no shame. Now they have shame. Now they are like, oh man, we're bad. We need to hide. And so they actually did a behavior. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The behavior to try to cover up the shame. That's why they covered themselves. Okay, I see that we're naked. We need to do something to cover this up and we need to hide because we're bad now. And when Jesus begins to engage them, he asks them, what did you do? And he forces them to engage the shame. He says, why are you hiding? He's identifying the shame.
Mm-hmm.
And they begin to answer, this is what we did, this is who we are. And then, Adam's like, she made me do it, and go into it. And what Jesus is going to get to in this story is getting to the actual root of what happened. It's, you guys are hiding, but what happened was you were tempted. And in your temptation, you were severed from me. There was a point in which something happened and you were severed. Now, Adam and Eve have to take responsibility for what they've done in their story. We have to take responsibility for the outcome of our story. But for us, where has the enemy come in and exploited things that, has happened to us and then turned it,
Such a
turned
great
it to a
question.
place where we're living in shame? And that's what we're going to talk about next week. And because we really want to finish this cycle. So we don't stop at shame. And if you notice, the beauty of the story of even the woman at the well or even Peter, Jesus didn't stop at shame. He named the shame with them, but then got to the root of why they were doing what they were doing. Why Peter went back, why Peter, he engaged him with love and said, serve my sheep. And then it says in the third time that he asked him clearly to make up for the three times that he denied him, it says that Peter was grieved. And then the Lord said, go, like, feed my sheep. I want you to be a part. I want you to be with me, and actually restored the very place where the trauma occurred. So we're going to talk about that a little more next week. Here's some questions that I had for you. And I'd love any last thoughts that you have, Shara, about this. Shame is a very big topic. I know it is. I'm trying to make it very simplistic because I think it's ominous and kind of like, ooh, it's shame. And it's not really clear what we do with it. We kind of know what it is, but what do we do with it? It is not the end of your journey. It's also not the beginning. It's in the middle. It's in the middle. We got to name the shame, but it is in the middle. It is not the end. It is the middle. It's moving us to the root of why we even have shame. So a question that you could ask yourself this week, well, I mean, definitely go back last week and go, what are some of the behavior patterns that I'm living out that aren't serving me well? They're just not serving me well. And then ask yourself the question, what is the narrative that's driving this behavior?
Yeah.
What do I believe about myself or others that is driving my behavior? Because although, Shara, you have contempt for self, there is so much contempt for others because of how much they have hurt you. And so it's like, nope, I'm not going there. That's kind of what we discovered. Like, I'm not going back to church. I'm not going to go. I mean, you do go to church, but I'm like, church as a whole, like, I'm not doing that. I'm not engaging in deep commitment and conversation because they are going to hurt me. And therefore I have contempt towards them. I have contempt for depth of relationship. So we look at our patterned behaviors that are not really serving us. And we look a little bit deeper and naming, what do I believe about myself or others that keeps me in this cycled behavior? That shame. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, when I've asked myself those questions in different areas of my life, the easiest way for me to identify, because it can feel so looming when you're in the car and you're just driving, it's crazy how much will come out when you sit down to write. So even just like putting those two questions on paper and let your mind go with it. Like just start writing your thoughts on it and watch where it leads you and read it back. I feel like it's super helpful if you find yourself kind of up against a wall. Like, I can't really figure out, for some reason, there's a emotional block there, and letting me identify some of those things, try writing. It's a lot more disarming, I would say.
Yeah.
That's just
so
my
good.
2 cents on that.
No, for sure. So good. And I think it's really good to know too, that sometimes don't get frustrated if it's hard. Like, I'm trying so hard and I can't find it. This is where group work really does. Really, if you find like a solid people that are not trying to fix you, but are asking good questions, that can help you. This is why we've created Freedom Academy. This is why we do our online membership. This is why I wrote Free and Fully Alive. This is why, even the exchange that I offer is a group work. That sometimes it's hard. The Bible says it's hard to see. We look in a mirror dimly lit. Like it's hard to see the full truth, or even here's what I'm experiencing. And then someone can ask some good questions, like light bulb goes on, like, oh, that is what I think. Oh, where did that come from?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard. And so be kind to yourself, move a little slower if you need to. But this work is noble work and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
bring about healing. But if we look at these places of contempt, that's our outcome behavior ultimately of a rooted trauma, but it's manifested shame outside of it, like how we respond outside. And so we work backwards. We see the patterns
Mm-hmm.
in which we don't want to continue doing or that are not serving us anymore. We move backwards into what is the narrative we believe that's driving that behavior.
Yeah.
And then next week, we will look at what actually began to create the shame. What
Mm-hmm.
is, and how do we look at that? How do we define that? And what does it need to actually heal
Yeah.
so that we actually can identify shame more quickly and operate in a different way. I'm not letting shame define my outcomes. I'm going to actually let the care that I've received drive my outcome and what I do. Make sense?
Good. So good.
Good. It's good. So next week, guys, we'll dive into this. This is really, really, really complex stuff, to be honest with you, but given to you in a way that's simplistic, in a way that you can begin to understand so that you can live a more fully alive life. And it does start with honesty. And that's important. So we are here for you. I'm so excited to be doing this with Shara because Shara, I think you offer such a gift to the people listening of just like, okay, time out. What?
And it's all authentic. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Help me out here.
Help me understand this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it's all in my brain. So I'm just like, okay, this is how we do it. But this stuff is not easy. It's hard and it's painful. And it's not just some kind of formula. This is our hearts we're talking about, our stories we're talking about, our fears, our embedded nervous system responses that we can't even help ourselves. It just happens because our nervous system responds because we've been traumatized and our body is good and it will protect us from perceived danger. Even if it's not there, it will protect us. So it's so helpful to have you on here, guys. If you are loving this series, we would love for you to review and to subscribe and to share this podcast. I think Karrie Beth said that we have like 200 new followers watching this or subscribing to this or something in the realm of that. I mean, I'm terrible at this, which to welcome all of you here. I'm so excited that you guys are coming. We would love to spread the word because I think we need, in order to heal, I think we have to be trauma informed, biblically sound, and spirit filled. And if those three pillars are in place, I truly believe that the abundant life that God talks about is for us on this side of heaven. So excited
smash
to
that
keep
like button.
Smash that subscribe button. Smash it hard.
Smash it hard and tell your friends to smash it too.
We love you guys. We'll see you guys next week.